Good evening, ladies, gentlemen, and everything in between. We are here today for the pilot episode of what I might turn into a thing, depending on a few factors, where we will be talking about how to survive in a world inhabited by monster trolls. Now, before I get to telling you on how to deal with particular kinds of monster trolls, you need to be able to identify how dangerous the world you've ended up in is. Doesn't matter how you got there, whether it was being hit by Chuck Coon, or, this is some interdimensional BS or whatnot. We will have to be able to identify a threat. So, the first thing you do when you get stuck in a world like this is you gotta, in any situation like this, you must stay calm, determine what's dangerous, find somewhere safe, and keep yourself alive. All of that is important before anything else. In all likelihood, the direct danger of monster trolls will be secondary to getting food in your stomach and a roof over your head. In all likelihood, being able to do those will be tremendously valuable in the case of an attack. It is always a good idea to remember that you are still mortal, in all likelihood. From here, we must now look at how dangerous, in general, the monsters in your world are, starting with highest risk, worst case scenario. In a worst case scenario world, you will be under constant attack and risk constant death. There is no surviving if you are caught by a monster, and you really, really should not want to be caught by one. This is, in a worst case scenario situation, you are fucked. To avoid any and all contact with basically anything other than yourself. Normally, being able to get some support on your side is useful, but in a worst case scenario world, the support is most likely going to be a trap. Unless, there's someone from home that you can trust, in which case they could still get mind controlled and be a trap. You must be incredibly wary, but thankfully, this kind of world is incredibly rare, because not everyone likes everything that isn't human waiting to eat you. Our high-risk situation will generally have a handful of monsters that won't just outright try to kill you. And because of that, some level of peace may be possible with those types of monsters. There will be monsters that will try to kill you, let it be through war or draining or whatnot. And you can survive for a very long time, provided you can avoid being killed. It is, at this point, survival becomes possible, although it's still incredibly difficult. This is where things like Monster Gold Quest are situated, where you can technically do stuff as an ordinary person, but you'd be better off sticking back home and trying to avoid conflict with these monsters at any cost, because you will die in almost every situation. Our next risk level is the moderate risk. When you're dealing with a world of moderate risk, like my example here is the world of Toho, you will generally not be able to fight a monster one-on-one, but unlike the high-risk worlds, you can generally avoid death or being killed in one way or another, i.e., again, using Toho as the example, you can avoid most fights with monsters by simply showing respect to them. You might still be on the menu, but you can keep yourself off of it by, some method or another. You can keep yourself safe with some level of effort, and you won't be completely and utterly screwed if you're targeted, since you can and the targeting in a somewhat safe manner if you are a little bit clever about it. Just be sure not to let yourself get eaten. Now we get to the low risk, where getting eaten in any sense other than sexually is basically off the table. Monsters will more or less act like humans at this level, where they might be a little bit crazy, or still have some animal features or whatnot, but more or less they'll be following more or less human laws, generally speaking. This is where things like Necropara would line up. Well, they can still hurt you, but they'll generally try to avoid it out of, good sense. There might still be some bad apples in there, but for the most part, safety is pretty much along the lines of just not getting on anyone's bad books. It's a more or less chill situation. This is possibly the best case scenario, but there is one scenario that goes a little bit further than, they're just humans with monster features, you don't have to worry about being eaten, and that is the absolute least dangerous situation where there is some force or another that prevents the monster ghouls from causing direct harm to humans, which of course is the MGE way of things. It's also kind of what happens in Mongol Dreams, where you've got a situation where the only way to defeat a monster is the Ludes, and where the inability to harm humans is more so a way to protect the monsters than to protect the humans. Uh, so this type of world usually ends up being a magical realm because, come on, this at this point you're just throwing them in for the lewds. There's no other reason for it. That's that. Now, why is this all important? Well, first of all, if you're able to identify what being able to identify worlds and what check marks on this that they meet, you're going to be better able to uh, to hypothesize and estimate the dangers that other certain monsters will have. A slime in MGE is going to be incredibly different from a slime in MGQ, despite the names being incredibly similar, and being able to tell that your world is on one end of the spectrum or the other will be a massive help in determining whether or not that slime will dissolve you whole. Now, none of these groups of sets are going to be all entirely accurate all of the time. For example, if you are in the MGQ world, you in parts of the central continent, it'll seem more or less like it's a moderate risk world, where in the other two continents of the north and south, it's a lot closer to the high risk example. Or in MGE, where the human factions will generally be telling you that it is at the highest possible risk factor, when in actuality it is at the lowest. So, being able to tell at what level you are will be quite important. And being able to identify trends, i.e., whether or not you will be eaten or not, or whether or not the monsters are in it for the loot or not, whether or not they're civil, or whether or not they'll try to gang up on you, or whether or not other humans are at all to be trusted. That'll be up to you to figure out, because I'm not in any of those worlds, despite how much I would want to be. You need to be able to figure it out, and I just need to give you the tools. So, with these tools, can you identify how dangerous your favorite world is? How dangerous Monster Musume or interspecies reviewers or anything else? How dangerous What threat level is your favorite world? Go ahead and comment that below because I feel like saying you guys should comment something and I want to have a little bit more engagement on that end. And for the rest of you who have made it this far despite how monotone my voice is and how stupid this video is, thank you for attending this class on how to survive in a monster cool world. Second one will be coming out at some point in the near future, and I will most likely be focusing in on slimes, how to identify them, their strengths, their weaknesses, and how to not get eaten. Thank you. Good night.